Most high, all-powerful, all-good Lord, all praise is yours, all glory, all honor, and all blessing. To you alone, Most High, do they belong. No mortal lips are worthy to pronounce your name.
Altissimo, omnipotente, bon Signore, tue son le laude, la gloria et l'onore, et ogni benedizione, et ogni benedizione a te solo se confano et nullo homo e degno de nominarte.
Be praised, my Lord, through all your creatures, especially through my Lord, brother, son, who brings the day, and you give light through him. And he is beautiful and radiant in all his splendor. Of you, Most High, he bears the likeness.
Laudato sia Dio mio Signore, cum tutte le tue creature, specialmente messer lo frate sole, la quale giorna et illumina nui per lui, et ello è bello, et radiante, cum grande splendore de te, Signore, porta significazione.
Be praised, my Lord, through our sister Mother Earth, who feeds us and rules us and produces various fruits with colored flowers and herbs.
Laudato sia mio Signore per nostra Matre Terra, la quale sonostenta et guberna et produce diversi fructi et colorati fiori et herbei.
Praise and bless my Lord, and give thanks, and serve him with great humility.
Laudato et benedicite mio Signore, Re et Re gratiate et servite a lui cum grande humilitate, cum grande humilitate.
Everyone, and welcome to Sunday service. How is everybody?
Awake and ready.
Very sweet. For those who don't know us, I am Nayaswami Daiva. This is Nayaswami Gangamata, and we are pleased to be with you. We have a special privilege today. Ananda, many of you know, most of you know that Ananda is a worldwide work. It started in a little village in Northern California, 900 acres, actually on about 70 acres in the foothills. And it was started by Swami Kriyananda back in 1967. He had been a direct disciple of Paramhansa Yogananda, and he took to heart Yogananda's dictum to spread these teachings, to make them available to the world. And an added part of that he felt directly connected to was the creation of what Yogananda called world brotherhood colonies, but basically small communities and centers around the globe where people could come from all faiths, all religions, all backgrounds, and feel increasingly for the presence of God through meditation. From that little start and just a handful of people, it has, Swami Kriyananda used to say, and this was in the late 60s, early 70s, people would be sitting around in a very leaky dome with mud streets and no money and everything, and the dome would be leaking, be raining. And he'd say, you know, Ananda will become a global work at some point. And people would look at each other, and they'd look at him, and they'd go, okay. And in fact, across the 45, almost 50 years now that it's been around, that's in fact the case. It spread along the West Coast. It started to spread out from there across the United States. It went to Europe, concentric in Assisi, Italy, which is very sweet, as Yogananda again claimed St. Francis as his quote-unquote patron saint. And then in 2003, it went over back. It took these sacred teachings back to their roots, back to India, but cloaked in a new expression of what is Sanatana Dharma, eternally true. And because Sanatana Dharma is at the very heart of India, even though it's trying to grow up materially in this age, just like we're trying to grow up spiritually in the West in this age, and so the focus in India is on material prosperity and well-being. The power of spirituality, the power of Sanatana Dharma is just woven into the fabric of the soil, the culture, and everything. And so the work there has taken off like wildfire. Here we spend a lot of time trying to explain to everybody why it's a good idea to love God and how to love God and stuff. There they just love God and they want to know how to get in tune more completely. There are pockets in India that are very receptive and responsive. And one of them, the most dynamic center that we have on the planet, is in Chennai. And the center leader there, we have the privilege of having Nayaswami Dharmaraj here. He and his wife are the center leaders there. The world leaders, Nayaswami's Jyotishan Devi, were just there. And they gave a public talk, and it was 900 people managed to wedge themselves into the hall, and several hundred were turned away. Consistently, that's the kind of response. People are so desperately hungry for this and receptive. Anyway, he's here to share Sunday service with us, and I'd like to have him come on up and share the talk and just have you welcome him. Thank you so much for being here. Okay.
It's very lovely to greet you, old friends and new friends here. And I was here a few years ago also. My wife, Dharmini, has a sister who lives in Portland, and so that's what the earthly DNA family bring us to Portland, and then we slip out Sunday morning for the spiritual family. And you know, I need to go to church on Sunday. And okay, that everyone can relate to. It's just to clarify also that I was born in America, because I met someone recently and they said, so you're from Chennai, and what was your native dialect? And I said, well, American English, East Coast. And so my father is from India, but I was born here. And it's, when looking at these two topics of humility, which was of course the affirmation, and then also how high should we aspire, in a way it could seem that there's a contradiction, because on one level humility, we're sort of retiring and feeling lesser of ourselves, and yet how high should we aspire seems like it would imply a certain confidence or a certain kind of even chutzpah to say, okay God, I want to be one with you. It reminds me of a story of a temple where after services everyone had gone and the head priest was standing in front of the temple, the altar, and he just said, God, I am nothing. I am nothing. And the sort of junior priest, the secondary priest, was also there, and he too, felt the inspiration and said, Lord, I am nothing. And then the sweeper, who was also outside cleaning up, saw this and just inspired by their devotion. He said, Lord, I am nothing. And the head priest turned to the other and said, so look who thinks he's nothing? You see, it's so tricky, the spiritual path, in a way, this balance between forgetting ourselves, but then also having, again, that confidence, that courage, that, in fact, focus on God. And that's the secret. The secret to merging with God, to becoming more, is to focus on where we're going, not where we've been, and not where we seem to still be. Just forget all that, and then just go forward, loving God. Now, the epitome of this, in my mind, is Swami Kriyananda. His earthly passing, his leaving of the body, his moksha days, we're calling it, moksha means spiritual liberation, was this past Thursday, the 21st of April. And in Swami Kriyanandaji, those of you who met him, and those of you who have met him also, if not in person, then on YouTube or in other ways, he was aspiring for the highest. And he manifested so many divine qualities, and really was for us the embodiment of Yogananda's power. We knew Yogananda through him. And yet, he was also very humble. He was not focused on himself. He wasn't drawing people to himself. He wasn't really even thinking about himself. And so he showed us this blend when of aspiring high and also being humble. When I met Swami Kriyananda for the first time, it was in Assisi, Italy, and I was sitting in the audience. I had flown to Italy with the express purpose and desire of meeting him. This was in 1999, and I was sitting in the, I think it might have been the front row, and the people had said, oh, Swamiji is sick, he might not give the satsang today. It was a Saturday. And then the word came that he would, and he entered the back of the room, and I could sort of hear, because people were standing up, there was a rustle, something had happened, but it felt to me as if the doors had been blown off the temple. I thought, somebody sick might be kind of hobbling up to the front and kind of and, kind of feverish. He was full of power. And this was a power, again, that I felt even before I saw him. And I was so impressed by that power. He came striding up to the front. He sat down. He said, let's meditate. In fact, because there's a Kriya initiation tonight, he said, let's meditate more than we would normally in a satsang. So I sat there in the front row, and I have to admit, though I was feeling somewhat peaceful, I was also feeling somewhat anxious. I didn't quite have a sign that said, with a big arrow pointed at me, just sort of like, excuse me, Swamiji, I'm here. He certainly didn't look at me and say, or anything like that. He knew I was coming. I had, corresponded with his secretary, but there was no big, this was the moment of our meeting. And as I was meditating, I felt more and more anxious and sort of uncomfortable and hot, just, ugh. And I realized this, I'm meditating with Swami Kriyananda and all these other people. This is not the sort of right attitude. And just, it was evidently not the right attitude because how I was feeling. And so I meditated on, and I thought, how can I get out of this? And I realized that I was trying to get something from him. And I thought, what about all that he's given me? What about all that I've received, even before I ever met him, through his books, through his music, through all of Ananda? It was only through Ananda that I discovered Autobiography of a Yogi and the Spiritual Path. Let me just think of thanking him for what I've received rather than trying to get one more thing And so I had an attitude of gratitude. And so I offered that gratitude. As soon as I had that thought, this cool wave descended upon me, and I just thought, because I was just trying to give back. So then as we were leaving the temple, he was walking out. In those days, he drove himself back and forth from the temple, and I walked out with the crowd with him, and though I was still feeling grateful and perhaps a bit humble, I still did say, excuse me, Swamiji, I'm Dharmaraj. And he said, oh, you're Dharmaraj. Somehow I thought you'd be taller. Perhaps I had not aspired high enough. But then he added, isn't it funny how we build up impressions of people? And I just kind of, was just, kind of smiling, embarrassed, and shocked all at once. And so I just kind of, yes, and so on. Then he said, how long will you be with us? And, I hope we get a chance to meet more, and so on. And it was years later that I remembered that he had said, isn't it funny how we build up impressions of people? And that one of the things he was saying to me was, what kind of impression have you built up of me? Don't worry about your impression of me. Get to know me as I am. Forget, these other preconceptions or whatever it is, and just get to know me. And so that was a lesson that I needed but didn't grasp for some years. Now, the wonderful thing about how high we should aspire is that Yogananda told his students, disciples, those practicing Kriya, those aspiring to live higher lives, he said, you should seek to be a free soul in this lifetime. You should seek to be, which in the Sanskrit name for that is Jivan Mukta, which means freed while living. What that means, very briefly, is that we have not gotten rid of all karma, which hopefully comes as good news, because to get rid of all karma, my gosh, there's a lot. But that's not what we have to do first. Even to become free, all we have to do is get rid of that which creates karma. And that which creates karma is the ego. If you've studied Raja Yoga and you know about the vrittis in the spine, these little seeds of karma, these little whirlpools that block the energy flow in the spine, well, the Mahavritti, the mother vritti of them all, is the ego. And it's the one that makes all the babies. And so if you get rid of the ego, then you don't have to worry about creating new karma. Our karma becomes finite. Yoganandaji said at a Kriya initiation, through the practice of Kriya, you can burn your bad karma and quickly reach the home of the Father. And so it's a wonderful gift. Of course, if you have Kriya, if you are preparing for it, or if you're wondering what it is that I'm talking about, there's explanations of the Kriya Yoga meditation technique. And so on one level, we have a very simple answer to not only how high we should aspire, but how we should get there, practicing Kriya. And I see that in devotees everywhere, and I see it in this room, people some of whom I've known for 20 years. That meditation, and trying to live for God, you see it in the face. You see it in the eyes especially. And it isn't that you see because, well, this half of the room is levitating, 1 foot up off the seats, and this one hasn't been breathing since I started talking, and so on. It doesn't always manifest that way. And in fact, sometimes when we see such things manifested, as we don't quite see that in India, but we've had quite some experiences in India with people having more of what you might call wowie-zowie experiences, it doesn't necessarily translate to a light in the eyes. And it's really that light in the eyes, the joy in the heart, and that radiation, and that willingness to share with others, that is really how we see our spiritual growth. We don't always see these kinds of things in America. In fact, Swamiji said, I don't know if it's Divine Mother's will for us to have those kinds of experiences. He said, because you would think statistically we would have at least a few, levitators by now. And, we sort of said, I've seen the spiritual eye only 25 times, but, it's okay, I can live with it. He said, first of all, if you have such deep experiences, you really don't want to do anything else. And our role is to manifest this work in this world at this time, to help usher in this new age, but especially to forward Master's ideal of world brotherhood colonies. I mean, just think about it. This was a central tenet of his mission, Yogananda's mission, world brotherhood colonies. So when he's marshaling up souls and saying, okay, listen, we're gonna land in Beaverton. I mean, who is he going to call? He's not going to call the duds. He's going to call the shock troops and say, listen, there's going to be McDonald's and, highways and iPhones and everything, but, plant roots for God. Hold high these truths for everyone. Help people to understand, it's okay. Meditating actually doesn't make me so weird. It makes me even kinder, nicer. You might want to try. Showing people it's okay. It can even deepen their faith in their own religion. It's not a religion in itself that anyone has to convert to. It converts you to your own higher self, as Swamiji said all the time. So you are living and you are forwarding Master's ideal of world brotherhood communities, of souls, of dedicated to God, practicing Kriya, right here in the middle of this. I won't say materialistic country, because it's also a country that loves God very much, but there's a strong trend towards materialism. An Indian friend of ours in Chennai has daughters living in a East Coast city, which I will not name, and she went there to visit them, and she said, I had a hard time meditating. Now, she lived in India all the time, which is like being a fish in water when it comes to spirituality. So it's kind of like, what's the problem? There's no problem. And so then she came to this city, rhymes with Cleveland, and she was, sorry, Daiva. And she was trying to meditate. She said, I couldn't concentrate. I just kept thinking about shopping. So again, for us as reincarnated yogis to bring these teachings here, which again, God only sent this work in response to people's desire for it. So I'm not at all, poking fun at the people here, at anywhere, because it's that deep yearning for God that drew this in the first place. It's our own personal deep yearning that draws God's response. Otherwise, he says, I will wait. He doesn't impose. I mean, why serve someone food if they're not hungry or they don't realize they're hungry? And of course, I grew up not realizing how hungry I was. But when I found Autobiography of a Yogi, when I met Swami Kriyananda, I said, I want that, or I want as much of that as I can get in this lifetime. It's important to remember also, because we might say, well, Yoganandaji said we should aspire to be spiritually free in this lifetime. At a Kriya initiation in 1949, he said, among those present at that time, there will be a few fully liberated souls and quite a few liberated souls, these jivan muktas, this finishing the karma, finishing the ego. So spiritually free beings, there will be quite a few. And remember, this was not in the Himalayas. This was, outside of Pasadena. I mean, it was just right, some hundreds of miles from here. When one of Swami Kriyananda's early friends, David Hugendijk, many of you know him, many of you know Leela Hugendijk, his wife, who lived much longer and was Swamiji's personal assistant. But when David left his body, Swamiji said at his funeral, I felt he was free spiritually. And then, interestingly, when Leela left her body, and of course many of you may have traveled there to Ananda village for that astral ascension, he said, I felt she was free spiritually. What more can I say? And Swamiji was not one to say, things just poetically or just to say things just to make us all feel good. In that way, in a false way. He only said it because he felt it. Now, whether we are going to be free spiritually or whether we're going to be a half incarnation away from being free spiritually, what does it matter? At a certain point, we reach a realization where we say, I want to get as close as I can. And I'm thinking again about where I'm going, not where I've been or where I am. So Master Yoganandaji said to Swamiji, "You will be free. You will find God at the end of your lifetime." He said, "But don't think about it, because a lot of work remains for you in the world." But he said, "You will find God at the end of life." Now, does that mean at the last moment of life, or the last weeks of life, or the last 50 years of his life? I don't know. But we know someone who found God. We have it on Yogananda's authority. So he also showed us how in so many ways, as Yogananda did too, it looks normal. Yogananda actually did very many amazing miracles, but Swamiji too, his whole life was a miracle. He did all kinds of miracles too, but they were quiet. A friend of mine told me he was in the back of the room, huge gathering, Swamiji was there, and this man really wanted to meet Swamiji and really wanted to say hi, and all he could do was stand in the back and pranam as Swamiji came in, and Swamiji just went right past him. And then as Swamiji was going back out, the man was in the back, sort of strategically placed to kind of, be in the front and pranam. And Swamiji again just walked right past him. And my friend's name was Patrick, and so he went, "Oh, that's okay." And suddenly he felt this hand on his arm. And he looked, and it was Swamiji, and Swamiji said, "Nice to meet you, Pat." And he wondered about that because he hadn't told him his name. He didn't know how he knew his name. And so these kinds of stories, another friend of mine was greeting Swamiji at the airport. There was a large gathering and people were all sort of pranaming, and he was saying, "How are you?" and "Nice to see you," and "How's everybody?" and so on. And this one friend was not, being seen, and he sort of cried out in his heart, "I love you," silently. And Swamiji, looking, just went, "How are you?" Just right to him. And he said, "Fine, sir," just. And so you see, we see these are wonderful, but also as they inspire us to share in that same way. I was speaking with a friend who was saying, we have to carry on this work, obviously, all together, and we have to also carry on that spirit that we saw in Swami Kriyananda. And, again, the spirit of Yogananda through him, through each of us. And he said, but we are not Swami. I mean, on the one hand, he was very humble. On the other hand, he was very much a great soul that just came that way. So how do you balance these two? I can't write 149 books, so I'm trying to write, half a blog post. And, what to speak of composing music, 400 pieces of music, and so on. What about that? But then we realized, well, but Swamiji was trying to carry on the work of Yogananda, who is an avatar. I mean, God incarnate. And so you're not going to compete with that, not yet. And so just bowing and just wanting to be at his feet, but yet even knowing that, having lived with the manifestation of God, as Swami Kriyananda did with Yogananda, knowing that he couldn't at all be in that same club, see how much he accomplished anyway. And so in the same way we can say, look at what we can do, whatever we can do, and whatever in fact you are all doing already, is so powerful and is such a gift to the world. And as that we do that, it also uplifts our own souls. I'll just close by sharing one more aspect of this. When Swami Kriyananda left the body 3 years ago, again on April 21st, once I calmed down, once I stopped crying, once I kind of got over the initial shock, and then it took a long time to get over the rest of the shock. But still, in that very early time, we had Sunday service. For those of you who were here, of course, you had Sunday service here. Swamiji left the body just in time for America to all have a Sunday service. It was a Sunday morning that followed. And I suddenly had this thought that I was less afraid of death because I wanted to see Swamiji again. And I had this thought that at the time of death, I'll see him again. And it wasn't that because, on the one hand, Yoganandaji did say, those who stick to the path to the end, I or one of the other masters will be there to greet them and usher them into the infinite. So there was that sort of guarantee and warranty that Master had given all of us as disciples. So you'll get something at the end. But But I did. I felt, I know Swamiji will be there. I mean, why wouldn't he be? Just sort of, oh, look, here he is. Well, I'm busy. You know, I mean, of course he's going to come and greet us all and say welcome. But that realization made me less afraid of death, because it was at that time I would see Swami Kriyananda again. It may have just been a personal feeling, but it was how I felt. And then recently, a longtime member of Ananda at Ananda Village, Nayaswami Brinde, passed away. And this was about a month ago now. And a friend of ours, also at Ananda Village, was going to visit her room late at night. Someone had said, it was a strange sort of request that, oh, we need this kind of a thing, and even though it's 1 a.m., can you go and set it up in case of, I mean, it was just kind of a, I don't fully understand it, but even if I did, I don't think I could explain it much more clearly. It was just a weird sort of thing he needed to do. So he went there on his little weird errand, and he got into the room, and he couldn't do what he needed to do. And I think it was because the room was full of people with her praying and so on, because she was definitely at the end of her life, it was known. And he decided to just sit and pray for her. And after a few moments, he had a vision of something. And I should preface this by saying, you know, in general, we don't have tons of visions, and he sort of said, I'm kind of the expert in having non-visions. You know, I do not have visions unless my eyes are open. And so he said he suddenly saw Nayaswami Brindeji, standing up on her bed, and holding her right hand was Yogananda, and holding her left hand was Swami Kriyananda. And he said they were so happy. She looked just like a little kid, and then they disappeared from his view. And then a moment later, he heard someone else in the room say, I don't think she's breathing anymore. And what was marvelous about that as well was that, this story is that another friend who was not in the room but was driving her car had the same vision at the same time. And so that was, I think, her parting gift to all of us, to say, you're doing great, just keep going, and you'll get to God. So God bless you.